We're trying to repair here is we're transferring all of our old family photographs to video, so it might be easier for people in the future to read it or to see them. We hope I should say, that what we do here is worth seeing in the future. Picture of 92 Halsted Avenue, and the woman on the left is my great-grandmother, Rose Ann Connelly, and the woman to her right is her sister-in-law, who went back to Ireland after my great-grandfather died. Picture of my great-grandmother in her later years, and I might add that Roseanne McNally was Patrick Connelly's wife. We have no picture of Patrick Connelly. I guess they didn't take too many pictures in those days. But this is my grandfather's mother, and I don't recall the year she died, but wait a minute, I do recall it. My great-grandfather Patrick and Roseanne McNally came to the United States from Ireland about 1878 and settled in Slow, New York, and they had 4 sons they brought with them. Bernard was my grandfather, and his brother John, Patrick, and James. Now this is a picture of my grandfather, Bernard James Connelly. He was born in 1883 and died in 1941, the day after Pearl Harbor, as a matter of fact. He's holding my cousin, I think it's Robert Turner, in his arms. And I'm not sure when this picture was taken, but probably the late 30s or early 40s, late 30s probably. This is a picture of my father, John P. Connelly. He was born August 23rd, I think it was 1903, and the picture was taken at 92 Halsted Avenue. And it was I don't know where they found that horse, but he was a pretty ugly horse, although John is a good-looking young guy. This is a picture of my grandfather, Bernard Connelly, and a picture of my 2 aunts. That's my father's sister. On the left is Mary Connelly, and she married Leo Gleibersach. And on the right is Helen Connelly, and she married Robert Turner. One of the few pictures I have of my grandfather, really. Now this is a picture of my father's sister, Catherine, and she's with her husband, obviously, on her marriage day, Art Rabatoy. Art was a fine guy. He died many years ago, and Catherine died a few years back. Now this is my mother's mother and father, which would be my maternal grandparents. And the man on the left is Charles O'Loughlin Ernest. He was born 1869 and died April 1926. And the woman on the right is Eugenie Smith, born 1862 and died January 1943. Now Charles was Eugenie's second husband. She had 6 children by her first husband, and his name was Charles Smith. And she had 6 children by her second husband, Charles, whose name was Charles Ernest. And this picture was taken, I guess, at their home at 246 Box Avenue, which at that time was semi-farmland. And this is a picture of my mother, Alice Ernest Connelly, which is taken at 246 Box Avenue. And these days passed, and even I remember as a child The photographers used to come around with their pony and take a picture for so much money, whatever it cost at the time. And zoom in for a little better picture there. Yeah, clear. Okay. Okay, now here we have on the left rear is my grandmother Eugenie and my grandfather Charles, and then on the right was my Aunt Esther. And in the first row, my mother is the second from the left. That's Alice Ernest Connelly. The other three gals I don't know, but if I recall, this picture was taken in North Tonawanda. They were up for a Sunday visit, and this is where my grandmother's family originated. I shouldn't say originated, but that's where they settled after coming over from Europe. My grandmother's father's original name was Brouwer, and I'm not sure how that's spelled, but it was a French name, and he came from France. But he changed his name, I guess, to Smith at some point in time because of some kind of a problem in France. But at any rate, my maternal grandmother is half French and half German. Now this is a grouping of my mother's sisters and brothers. I might first add that the three on top are Ernests and the three on bottom are Smiths. Now upper left is my Uncle Albert, and the girl in the center is Aunt Evelyn, and the man on the right is my Uncle Harvey. Then on the bottom picture on the left, that's my Uncle Arch, and that's my Aunt Harriet, and then my Aunt Mabel. This is pretty distanced. I don't know how well this is going to come out, but it's about the best I can do under the circumstances. Excuse me. Now here we have a grouping, and the woman in the upper part of the photograph is my grandmother Eugenie at age 44. And below on the left, the gentleman on the right in each of those pictures is my Uncle George, and it was George Smith. And on the right is my Aunt Evelyn. It's Evelyn Ernest Murphy, and she's the mother of my cousin Dennis Murphy. Blown up shot of my grandmother at age 44. Nice looking woman after all those children, by gosh. Now this is a picture of my mother and Doris as a infant, and I believe it was taken in about 1926. That was the age of the flappers, and you can tell by my mother's dress that she was involved in that stage of affairs. Now this is a picture that was taken in June of 1937 at the Shrine of the Little Flower in Detroit, Michigan. And on the left is my sister Doris, and next to her is my mother Alice. The next three I don't know, but then there's myself standing next to my father, and my father John is holding my brother John in his arms. I vaguely recall this trip and this occasion, but I don't know who the other people are. At the same location, and you can see my sister Doris sitting on mother's lap, and to the right I'm standing next to my father, and my father's holding my brother John. Now this is probably the same time frame, probably about let's see, that's me there, so this is what? This is probably about 1929, as a matter of fact. It would be my father on the left, whose black hair is parted in the middle, and on the right is my Uncle Albert, that's mother's brother. And I'm not sure where the picture was taken, but I've got a nice looking camera. I'm holding a nice looking camera at that time, I guess. And this is another picture taken approximately 1929, and that's my mother Alice on the left. Doris is standing in front of her. My father John, and that's Bernard at 7 months of age. Now here's a picture taken, I'm not sure which year, but that's my father on the right. You can see he's a relatively young man, although his hair is not quite as black as it used to be. And on the left is obviously a friend whom I don't know. But my father was a fairly good-looking guy, I'd say. And most of my children and grandchildren remember him as an older man, so they've probably never seen these pictures before. This is a picture of Bernard and Doris, and I'm not sure the occasion or why, but apparently we posed for this picture. We don't have too many of these in the old family album. Alright, now this is a picture taken on Box Avenue. I recognize that big old apple tree in the back and a little ex-chicken. It used to be a chicken coop on the left there. You can just see the corner of the roof. First man on the left I don't recognize. The second man is my Uncle Gene. And of course the man holding me is Uncle Albert. And then next to him is Uncle George. So they're over at my grandmother's house working on a project of some sort. The guys are good guys. They took care of my grandmother and her property for years. Now here's a picture of Doris and myself. I believe Doris was 4 years old, I was a year and a half, and we're standing next to a Model A Ford. It wasn't our car because we never had a car for our entire lives. We walked, took buses, but that was, I'm guessing what, 1929, probably about 1929, 1930, probably right in the depths of the Depression. Now here's a picture of Alice with me sitting on the bench in white, my sister Doris and my brother John. Now John looks like a tough nut at that age, doesn't he? Look at that skull on his face. You know, come on, get closer, I'll give you a whack. My mother dressed me in white very often. We lived in an Italian neighborhood, and I'll tell you, it wasn't easy. All the little Italian kids wore knickers with their black socks falling down their ankles, and I came around in my little white outfit. Life was not easy. And again, these are Depression days, probably, 32, 33, something like that. No, and that's my mother, of course, with Doris, Bernard, and John. I have no idea where that picture was taken, but it looks like some kind of a weekend holiday. We were out playing baseball or something of that nature. And again, this is the 1930-32 period. This is a picture of Bernard at age 7 months, and I'm sitting in the yard in someone's garden and doing some digging. Of course, I was always a gardener at heart, so this is probably where it began. Now here's a picture of Doris in her first communion outfit. I believe Doris was 7, Bernard was 4, and Jackie was 1.5 years of age. course, this is a picture of Bernard making his first communion. And I'm not sure exactly what year that was, but you can see me dressed in my little white suit. I was a good boy, though, they tell me. My father, though, wasn't too sure. He wondered what the hell I had there. Now, this is one of my class picture here. We lived on Benzinger Street, which ran off of Lovejoy in Buffalo, New York, which is not too far from Sloan, where my grandparents lived. And this was 43 School, and 43 School was located right on Benzinger Street near Lovejoy. And here I am in my little white suit, and as you can see, all my Italian friends are dressed in their knickers and socks and stuff. Well, I tell you, those are some tough years. And this is one more class picture from the same day, I guess. The same school. I honestly don't remember any of the people there, but we must have had a good time. And this is a picture of Doris and myself. I'm not sure just where this was taken. We lived in a number of places on the east side, and you can see we're both a little older here. And this could have been taken on Box Avenue. Not my grandmother's house, but we rented a house on Box Avenue between Moselle and the bridge. And it looks like that might have been it. We were about the right age at the time. And here's a picture of you-know-who on that same day at that same location. Good-looking shirt and tie. Interesting memories. Picture of Doris, my Aunt Esther, my mother, and my Aunt Evelyn. My Aunt Esther had epilepsy, and when she was a child, she was in a school playground and was hit in the head with a swing. And that, in those days, I guess they didn't know what the hell to do about it, but she ended up with epilepsy and lived at home with my grandmother for her entire life. And after my grandmother died, she lived with my Aunt Harriet. And then Esther died just before Harriet did. And here's a family grouping. Mother and Dad, Doris, Bernard and John. I'm not sure when it was taken, but you can see we're beginning to grow up. And this is a picture of Dad, Doris, myself, and John. And we were at Lake Erie. And I think my grandmother had a cottage out there at that time, because we sure never had a cottage. But again, as you see, it's a family beginning to grow up. No longer infants. John is the smallest, or youngest, I should say. And here's a picture of the swimmers. Out of the water with our tubes. Doris is becoming a young lady, and Bernard and John are still young boys. But there's choppy Lake Erie, and we had great time that day. I can remember that occasion. sometime in the 1940s, I think it was about 1940, we moved to the Kenfield Project and lived at 268 Hempstead Avenue. And this is the first. I have about 3 pictures here. This is of that era. This is the first one of Mother. And isn't that funny? See that card table sitting to the left over there with that little wagon on it? I forgot all about that, but the old memory bank kicks in and you remember that kind of stuff. Yeah, and this is was Kensington High School territory, and this is how Doris ended up going to Kensington High School. And here's John Kenfield making his first communion. And I think that man standing in the back with his foot in that bumper is my Uncle Jimmy. Uncle James driving the family car at the time. Man, we all made our first communion, by God, eventually. You can see by those cards that it's about the 40s, in the 40s someplace. And there's Mother and I sitting on the stoop at our place on Hempstead Avenue. Mother's cleaning her nails or doing something in nails, and I'm reading a book. It's funny, this is Kenfield, and we finally left Kenfield and went to High Street, I believe. And yet, after Helene and I were married, we came back to Kenfield and lived there for a number of years also. I want to correct a statement I made before. Earlier I said we moved from Kenfield to High Street, but that wasn't correct. We moved from Kenfield to Box Avenue. At that time, Grandma was not feeling well. In fact, she was ill, and she was living on about $100 a month Social Security check. So Mother and Dad and the kids, we moved in with her to, Mother wanted to take care of her and also to help in her support. And we lived there, I think, until sometime in 1945 when we moved to High Street for various reasons. And this is a picture of Mother and Jane and John, Jackie. We always called him Jackie when he was younger, on High Street. Jane was born in High Street, and that was a very difficult time for Mother. She was in the hospital for a while, and we thought she was going to die. And Aunt Mabel Dingle took care of Jane, I think, for almost 3 months. Very trying time. But at any rate, we're on High Street, and there's Mother, Jane, and John. And here's another shot. And this is of Dennis Murphy, myself, Jane, and Doris. And Dennis and Evelyn lived with us for a while on High Street. This is, they were between flats or something, I don't recall the reason, but we all lived together and had a good time. And I don't recall, this is probably around 1945, in that period, 46. And here we are again. Here's Bernard growing up, Mother with Jane, Jackie, and Doris. Must have been a nice summer day. I'm in my whites again. And here's a picture of myself, Jackie, and this is one of the neighbors. I think his name was, he was the Smith's grandson. I believe that was who it is. And we're at Crystal Beach. And there I am wearing my summer outfit again. White pants. I think I only had one summer outfit. And there's Doris and Bernard again. When we lived, I started high school when we lived on Box Avenue, so I started to go to East High School. And Doris was going to Kensington because we had lived in Kenfield. When we moved to High Street, I continued going to East High School, and Doris continued to go to Kensington High School. And later on, when the people at East High School discovered I was in Maston's district, and I had a problem with tardiness, I guess, at that time, they asked me to transfer, and I, at that time, transferred to Fosdick Maston. And I think I was in my sophomore, then into my junior year there. And here's a picture of myself with Bob Schisler. I had about 4 or 5 good friends throughout my lifetime, and Bob Schisler is one of the few that still remains a good friend. And he was always a riot, good friend, a lot of fun. And here we are in those days. We're just going up and starting to date girls, and we were dressing accordingly, and there I am in my only sport jacket. And here's my brother, Jackie. John, right at this point in time, is John was short as a young boy, and he just started to grow at this time, but not too much. And I mention that because I remember when I came back from the service, when I left for the service, he was about this size, maybe a little taller. When I came back, he'd grown about 2 feet, and it was like a beanpole. I couldn't believe it. But he grew, immensely. But here he is anyhow. It's my brother John. About 1946. And here's one more shot of John. We weren't too sophisticated in those days when it came to taking pictures. This looks like a tablecloth or something used as a backdrop, covering up the socks and underwear that were on the line. But it worked out. And certainly recognizes John. He's a very distinguished young man. I joined the Navy in October of 1947, and most of the pictures that follow were taken during that time, and many of the pictures are those that Mother sent me while I was in the service. This particular one obviously is John and my cousin Dennis. And here's Alice Connelly with Jane and Kathleen. Now Kathleen is Doris's daughter, and after she was divorced, she came home and lived with Mother and Dad in High Street, and Kathleen, of course, came with her. So Kathleen and Jane were like sisters, and in fact, Kathleen was like a sister to all of us. And here's John and Kathleen. John started high school this particular year, and he was going to go to Kensington, but then he decided it was too far, and he enrolled in Fosdick Maston. And here's a picture of Jane Alice. She's starting to grow up, but it'll take a while, but she's getting there. Pretty picture. Here's a shot of Kathleen, and she looks like a forlorn little girl sitting on the steps, wondering where his life is heading. None of us know either. All right, one more shot of Alice Connelly, John, Jane, and Kathleen. And here's a picture of Dad and Jane and Kathleen taken on Palm Sunday. And the picture of Dad, Mother, Jane and Kathleen on Palm Sunday also. On the back of the photo, Mother had written, that she said I look like Gloomy Gert. She had a lot of those great expressions. And here's a picture of Mother and Dad taken in the rear yard with our neighbors, the Gleisers. I almost forgotten about them until I saw this picture. These are the warriors, of course. There was nothing going on. Everyone was working hard at the defense factories and what have you, and little money to do anything, I guess. And here's Mother, Doris, Jane, and Kathleen on High Street. That building on the corner across the street was a tavern, and directly across the street from our house was a grocery store, a family-owned grocery store, and diagonally across the street was another building, which I recall was a tavern also. This was typical East Side living. And here finally is a picture of Jane and Kathleen dressed in their playthings, play togs, doing what they did best at the time, playing. Now these are pictures taken before I went to the service. At least I think they're all before I went to the service, but there's myself, Doris, there's a friend of Doris's, Jerry Lubai, and Bob Schisler. And we were out at the Point Breeze. That was the sign behind there is the South Shore Inn sign. So it was our beach days. And I had on my famous tank suit that I used to wear at the time. This is a sorority group from Maston High School. We used to date these gals and dance with them at the beach and all that kind of stuff. They were a lot of fun. We all had good times. This was before I met your mother. Here's a picture of myself on the left, Jerry Lubai on the right, Bob Schisler down below. And the guy sitting on top of the car, I'll be damned if I can remember his name. But that was Jerry's car, and this was taken out at the beach. Point Breeze. Another one of our famous shots, Don Grimmer, myself. Then on the bottom is Bob Schisler, above him is Jerry Lubai, and number 4 is the mystery guy, who I can't identify. This again was taken at Point Breeze. And there we are again, Jerry Lubai, Bob Schisler, I don't know who, and myself sitting on a break wall out there at Point Breeze, enjoying our youth and the days of summer. There we are again. I have no idea who the gal is with Bob, but I think these must have been taken all the same day, because I'm still wearing those stupid sunglasses. It must have been a bet or something I was paying off, because no one in their right mind would wear those sunglasses if they didn't have to. They were ugly. And here are the three of us, the three horsemen, as they called us in those days. And I think we're standing outside of Al Schlipper's bar on Best and Moores. We spent a lot of time there. It was one of our gathering places. One to my Navy pictures. I joined the Navy in October 1947 and was discharged sometime in, I guess, September, I guess it was 1949. I served a little less than 2 years at my hitch. Most of my, I went through training at Great Lakes Naval Training Station, then went to San Francisco and got my ship assignment, which was the USS Phaon ARB-3. It was a converted LST, and it was a machine shop, really, a floating machine shop. I was a seaman, I was not a machinist. And we went to the Hawaiian Islands, and then from there we went to the Kwajalein Group and a Weetalk Bikini, and took part in the Bikini atomic bomb test. And after that was all over, we came back to Hawaii, then to San Diego, where we decommissioned the ship, and I was discharged in San Diego. It's a picture of yours truly, and of course Don Grimmer. And I think this was taken when I was home on leave. After we completed boot training, I came home and Don Grimmer was home at the same time, because he was also in the Navy. A couple of good old friends. This is a picture of the USS Phaon ARB-3, which is taken from the starboard side of the flying bridge. It was quite a craft. It was almost flat bottom, rolled all over the seas. The first few days out, half the guys were so sick. In fact, one fellow almost died. They had to send him back by seaplane. He couldn't handle the seasickness. And here's a group of our seamen with the bosun's mate, whose job was to scrape and paint decks and all that kind of stuff. Brain surgeon work. This is while we're out to sea someplace. This is a picture of Gonzalez out of San Jose, California, and myself. We were up on the bridge. We were striking for signalmen. We were trying to rise above the status of seamen, and we had to learn the Morse code and all those things, and it was quite a job. And you had to learn how to blink those lights and send messages. We never really made it, but we had a lot of fun trying. Fellows waiting to go on Liberty, and of course that's me with my back to you, and then Mr. Gonzalez, Costello, Mr. Fox, he was from the Deep South, real Southern guy, Batting, and Pachetti. I had the duty that day, so I couldn't leave. This is the same group again, and there's the longboat waiting to take the guys to Liberty. You can see on the bow of that little boat, this is ARB-3. And there I am, kind of sloppily dressed for a sailor. But things were very casual around that time. We were on Liberty, and I believe we were in Tijuana, Mexico, when these pictures were taken. And this is another picture of me in Tijuana, Mexico. One of the bazaars, I guess. And here are the three of us at the racetrack in Tijuana. We don't look too overjoyed. We must have just lost a race. And here we are in a nightclub in Tijuana, and their sole responsibility was to sell us drinks as fast as we could drink them. And that tiny little table they had for us didn't permit you to accumulate much, so as they brought them, we drank them. That was our job. It was a wild place out at Tijuana at that time. There's nothing at all like it is today. In the Navy, when you cross the equator for the first time, you're inducted through a ceremony. I can't for the life of me remember the name of the ceremony now, but this is the beginning of the trials right here, and the guy leading the thing is called the Grand Dragon. And all of us who cross for the first time have to do beastly things. And I won't go into the details, but that's what this is all about. So that's where we are right now, crossing the equator, heading somewhere south in the Pacific. The sea cops, the old salts. Most of these guys are just coming out of the war, and this is their last cruise. But they're there to enforce the Order of the Dragon, in case anyone is recalcitrant. There are the sailors mustered for indoctrination. I've drawn an arrow there pointing to me. I guess they're taking muster before they start the ceremony. Those are the ship's officers and chiefs. One more shot. As you can see, the ship is listing. The sea is relatively calm, but the ship is listing back and forth, and with this old flat bottom. Well, you sure to have an iron stomach on that thing, I'll tell you. Earlier I think I said I joined the Navy in 47. That wasn't correct. I joined in October of 1946. These pictures that I've been showing you were taken sometime in March of 47. And then I was discharged, I believe, in 48. I don't have any pictures of the atomic test out in the Bikini Atoll. It was forbidden for any of us sailors to have cameras. And of course, they had the newsmen out there taking pictures that were shown all over the world. That's typical government routine, pretty stupid. And here I am early in the morning raising the colors, which is one of my jobs as I was striking for signalmen. This next series of pictures are after I was discharged from the service. And of course, here's a picture of Dad and myself. And there I have on my gray gabardine suit. It was probably the only suit I ever owned at that time. At any rate, I was home, and it was good to be home, I guess. Home from the Pacific just in time to shovel snow at 541 High Street. This is the summer of 1950, and we're at Grand Island, and that's myself, Kathleen, and Jane, and a dog named Rusty. I don't know whose dog it was. And this is a picture of Mother and Dad in 1950 at Grand Island. And this is the same year, and this is Mother relaxing on a different day at Grand Island. And here we have Mother and Dad relaxing in a hammock And again, I think that's on Grand Island. Now these pictures, these last couple of pictures were taken at Canisius Lake. Mother and Dad had a cottage at Canisius Lake, I believe, in 1950-51. And it was the time I was dating. I just started to date Helene. And we used to go to the lake here, Lake Erie, on weekends and during the summer. And I was driving an old 1926 Chevy called Esmeralda. And God, that thing was just a wreck. But twice a week I'd drive from Lake Erie to Canisius Lake and take Mother shopping and do what we had to do out there. And that car lasted, I used to have to pour as much oil into that thing as it did gasoline. Again, it's a shot of John, myself, and Mother at Canisius Lake. And here's a great picture of Jane and Kathleen at Canisius Lake, the two bathing beauties. I bet they'll be very happy to see these two pictures. Now I have about 5 pictures I missed and I have to show you. But this is when Mother and Dad lived on Halstead Avenue. These guys used to play cards all the time. That's Mother, Uncle Harvey, Uncle Albert on the right, and John. And they used to play pinochle, and sometimes they'd play all night long. And it got to the point where Dad was working night. He'd go to work at night to the railroad, and they'd be playing all night long, and they'd hear him come into the front door, and they'd all run out the back door, so he wouldn't know they were playing cards. But they used to have a lot of fun. I guess Harvey and Albert were helping Mother and Dad work on the house at that time. It was 92 Halstead. That was Dad's old homestead. And here's a picture of yours truly at a very early age. Picture of Uncle Harvey. When he and Albert were working at Halstead Avenue, and they were a couple. Uncle Harvey was a real hothead and a stubborn guy, and he and Albert had a fight about something one day, and they were using Uncle Harvey's ladder. And Uncle Harvey lived over on Lovejoy and Bailey, which is probably about 4 miles from Halstead Avenue, maybe 5 miles. Well, anyhow, they had a fight, so Uncle Harvey said, well, I'm taking my ladders and going home. And Uncle Albert said, well, I said, Harley, how are you going to get home? He said, you don't have a car. And he said, that doesn't bother me. So he put the big double ladders, wooden ladders on his shoulder and walked the 5 miles home. I mean, that's the kind of a guy he was. Oh my God. This is a picture, obviously, of Don Grimmer and Doris. This is, I think, Don came home. He was discharged, and I was away at the service. And he took Doris out to the town casino. Believe it or not, this is me on excuse me. This is me on the back of a horse at the Glen Casino. It was my first date with Helene, and they asked for a volunteer from the audience who could jump over the ass of that horse onto his back. And of course I volunteered. Helene thought she had a real loser. I'm not sure if she ever changed her mind, but that was a fun evening. And this is a picture of my father, his mother, Margaret Agnes Conroy, and my Uncle Jimmy. This was taken at our wedding, on our wedding day. And that's the end of our first sequence. And I apologize for running it so long. I perhaps took too much time in each shot, but it's our first opportunity. We thought, in spite of the time, you might enjoy it. Now we're going into our second phase, and Helene will be the narrator. And this won't be as long, we promise you that.
Okay, this is Helene Wagner Connelly, and the picture you're looking at right now is a picture of my great-grandfather. His name was Henry Matthews, and this picture was taken in New Brunswick,
Canada.
Isabel Matthews, my great-grandmother, wife of Henry Matthews, mother of Carl Matthews. This picture was taken in Brantford, Ontario. The picture of Carl Malcolm Matthews, my grandfather. Helene Margaret Nolan, my grandmother, who was married to Malcolm, Carl Malcolm, and they were married on September 29th, 1903 in St. Mary's Church in Toronto, Canada. This is a picture of Helena Nolan Matthews on the porch of 455 Herkimer Street in Buffalo with my grandmother. The picture's also taken with her dog Duke. I remember this porch and this dog, this whole thing very vividly because I spent many summers there. Picture of my mother, Mary Audrey Matthews. This was her first communion picture. It was taken in May of 1913. Another picture of my grandmother, Helena Matthews, with her son Joseph and his wife Carolyn Coletti. This also was taken on Herkimer Street. And if you notice with my grandmother, the brooch that she has on, she wears that on every picture. And I still have that same brooch. Picture of my Uncle Clifford, my mother's younger brother. He died before he was 7 years old. This is the only picture that we ever had of him. Picture of my father, Myron Wagner. No one really knew him. He died when Bernie was 6 months old. This picture was taken before he was married and after he had polio. He had polio and was crippled when he was about 16 years old. This is another picture of my father, Myron. Everybody called him Jeff. That was his nickname. And this is taken with his brother Harold. And this was also taken before he was married. The picture of my father, Myron. This was taken probably when I was about a teenager. At that time, he drove a cab for Van Dyke. He was a great guy. This is a picture of my mother, Audrey Matthews Wagner. This was taken probably when I was in my early years, like 12 or 13 years old. She worked in the film business then. This is a picture of me, Helene Wagner, taken in April 1929. I was 18 months old. The picture of my father and me was taken in 1930, so I was about 3 years old. I have no idea where it was taken. The picture of me holding my sister Norma was taken in 1934. I was 6 years old. Norma was 6 months. And it was taken the day before she went into the hospital to have a tumor removed behind her eye. She was blind in one eye, and they never thought that she would come through the surgery, but she did. It's a picture of my first communion class taken at St. Matthew's Church in Buffalo, on East Ferry Street in Buffalo in 1934.
Helene is the third girl from the right.
This is also a First Communion picture taken in 1934.
It's a picture of Helene Wagner Connelly.
This is a picture of me, Helene Connelly Wagner Connelly, taken in 1936. I was 8 years old, and I remember the dress. It was a real pretty gold-colored dress with buttons. I do not remember what the occasion was, though. It might have been a school picture, if they did pictures in those days. A picture of my mother, Audrey Wagner, myself, and my sister Norma, and a friend of my mother's whose name was Ann Fisher. And this was taken at Ellicott Creek Park. And I remember this day very well, too. This picture was taken the same day at Ellicott Creek Park. This is me with my mother's friend Ann Fisher and her sister. This is a picture of me, my grade school graduation, 8th grade graduation at St. Matthew's School in June of 1942. This is a picture of me, Helen Connelly, when I was a bridesmaid at my Uncle Joe and Carolyn's wedding. Uncle Joe was my mother's youngest brother. And I was about 14 or 15 years old here. This is a picture of my mother, Audrey Matthews Wagner. Mother's brother, Joe. These pictures are being taken off of one large picture. Joe was her youngest brother, and he died not too long after this picture was taken. And this is a picture of his brother Gordon, my mother's brother Gordon and Joe, from the same picture. And this one is one of Charles Matthews. Of Ross, my mother's other brother. She had four brothers, actually 5, one that died. This is Ross. He also died probably in his 50s.
Well,
this is a picture. This is another one from the same picture. This is my Uncle Charles. His nickname was Buster. This is a picture of myself when I was about 18 years old, taken when I stood up for someone's wedding at the Basilica Church, and the fellow with me was the usher. A picture of my mother and my sister Norma when my sister was quite young, and so was my mother. I don't know where it was taken.
I think that's at your apartment over there in the Kensington Gardens.
Well, maybe. A picture of my mother and my sister Norma. Of my mother, this was taken on an Easter Sunday morning when we lived on Marilla Street in South Buffalo, just before I was married. This is a picture of my Uncle Gordon Matthews. It was taken in Metz, France. He was with General George Patton's army during World War II. Gordon and Isabel Matthews, a few years later. Don't know exactly when.
Well, it looks like quite a few years later, Helena. But they were a very fun couple.
Picture of my mother. This was taken on North Street. She lived there before she moved into the apartment on Snyder Road. Picture of my mother and my sister Norma, and this was taken someplace in East Aurora when they were out for a walk, but I don't remember the occasion. Picture of my mother probably when she was in her 60s, 50s or 60s. It's really hard to tell. This concludes my pictures of my family. And now we will continue with pictures before we were married, after, and then pictures of our children.
Picture of my Uncle James and my Aunt Loretta. It was my Aunt Loretta's first communion. And this was taken, I believe, in June of 1924. Probably the backyard at 92 Halstead Avenue. Of Uncle James, taken about the same day, I guess, but you can see the horses in the background. That was pretty much country at that time. Picture of, quote, the tribe, end quote. It was taken at Bobby Burns Monument in Washington Park, Albany, on September 5th, 1927. And from back row is Aunt Catherine on the left, and my grandfather Bernard, and then my Aunt Mary on the right. And in the front row is my Aunt Loretta, and then my Uncle James, and then my Aunt Monica. These are one of the few pictures we have of the family. This is a picture taken May 4th, 1941, and left to right is my Aunt Mary, and then this is my father's Uncle Frank, and next to him is my father's Aunt Ellie. They were a brother and sister of my grandmother. And then, of course, on the right side is my grandfather, Bernard J. Connelly, and the little girl is Mary Ann Glubersach, and she was Aunt Mary's daughter and my cousin. Picture of my grandfather, Bernard Connelly, and that's my cousin James Turner in his arms. So this picture had to be taken about 1930, I'm guessing, something like that. The picture that was taken, I believe, in Hennepin Park. And that, of course, is my father, and then there's Doris, myself, and my brother John. She was taken the same day, and that, again, is Doris, myself, my brother John, and my mother, Alice. This is a picture of my great-grandmother, Roseanne McNally. She's on the left, and her sister's on the right. And that was taken in front of 92 Halstead Avenue before a porch was added. I'm not sure of the year, but you can see my great-grandmother still had black hair. When my grandfather Patrick died, Roseanne's sister on the right went back to Ireland to live. That same picture, it's a little blurry, but you can, in fact, you can see my grandmother Roseanne's face. You can see the resemblance to my grandfather. And of course, the woman on the right is a McNally, so she looks a little different. Some information about my grandfather's brother, James Bertrand Connelly. As you can see, he was a priest in the Dominican order. He was born September 22nd, 1877, died October 13, 1964. And James Bertrand Connelly, and you can see the resemblance to my grandfather. This is the only picture I've seen of him. I don't know if this will be legible, but the large caption on top, which is not here, says Father Connelly, Dominican, dies. And this is a write-up. I hope you can make it out. It's a nice little synopsis of his life in the order. And you know his name is spelled with an O, C-O-N-N-O-L-L-Y. That was the original spelling. Now this is St. Peter Martyr's Priory, which is the novitiate of the Dominican Fathers in Winona, Minnesota. And up in the right-hand corner of this picture, you see a slight arrow. There's a cemetery to the right, and that's where James B. Connelly is buried. Picture of my great-grandmother, Roseanne McNally Connelly, and this was taken about 1895. And again, you can see the strong resemblance to my father, my grandfather, Bernard. Okay, that's the end of this series of pictures. Now we can go on as planned before I interrupted everybody. Now we're going to go forward with our family album, and these would be pictures of before we were married, and then we'll begin with the post-marriage pictures. We were married September 9th, 1950. Here of myself and Don Grimmer. I was home on leave from boot camp before leaving for the Pacific, and I think this is probably late 1945. 45 is when it was, yes. Me aboard our ship, the USS Phaon, ARP-3. And this is probably taken in sometime in 1946. A group picture taken aboard ship. You can see me in the third row in the back on the right with the blonde hair. It's hard to believe all these guys are in their 70s right now. Time really passes. This again was taken, I'm guessing, sometime in 1946. We were out in the Pacific. We went to the Bikini Atoll and went through the atomic bomb tests out there. Mother and I. This was taken at Allegheny State Park, and it was probably taken around 1948, after I was out of the service. God, I was really a ugly-looking character, wasn't I? Physically, that is, at that age. Of your mother taken, I'm guessing 48, 49, prior to our marriage, and I think this is probably taken on Marilla Street when she lived in South Buffalo. I'm not positive, but I think that's when it was taken. Let's see if we can get a little close up here. Yeah. She was taken in May of 1950, and I, for the life of me, don't know where or when or the occasion, but that's your mother and I in May, and we were married in September. Of your mother and I, convincing the public of our love for each other with this public kiss, although we're not really grappling each other, so it's a very careful kiss, I guess, because we weren't married yet. People were pretty strict in those days. Your mother was pretty slim, had a good-looking figure too. She still has, but that was when we were both young and no fat, all lean, hard muscle. Of Helene and her mother, and this is, I believe, just prior to our marriage. They were getting ready to leave for the church. I'm not sure who took this picture. September the 9th, 1950. Your mother and I on our honeymoon, September 1950, and we're at Sunnybrook Acres at Lake George. Lake George, or is it New York State, or I believe it's New York State, up near Lake Lake Champlain, in that area.